What's up, everybody? Andrew Mahone here with Darium's Competitive Pokemon. Today's card of the day is Machamp GX from the new Burning Shadows expansion. So check this out. We got all 3 copies of Machamp GX here on display for you guys that you could pull out of the new Sun and Moon expansion. Machamp GX is a Stage 2 GX fighting Pokemon, and really cool art here on this card. I think this card is super sweet looking. Let's go ahead and check it out. So, like I said, Machamp Stage 2 Pokemon evolves from Machop, then up into Machoke. Machamp GX boasts a nice 250 hit points, which is pretty high for a Stage 2 GX. It's actually, pretty much the top of the list there. There are no GX Pokemon Stage 2s with 260 hit points from just my memory right now. So 250 is about as high as you could possibly hope for. To compare, Gardevoir GX has less at 230, Decidueye GX has less at 240, but your Incineroar GX and some of your other Stage 2s do have 250. So Machamp GX is a big guy there. 250, nice, formidable amount of hit points. We look down the card, we see that Machamp's GX does have 3 attacks. Let's talk about them. Machamp's first attack, Crosscut, costs 2 fighting energy, says if your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, this attack does 60 more damage. So it does base 60, you add 60 if your opponent's active is an evolution Pokemon. So it could do 120 damage if you take strong energy into account. Maybe you're doing 140 damage, maybe you have 2 strong energies, that could be 160 damage. And Crosscut, that's a pretty good attack. I mean, if you're attacking into a basic Pokemon, it's not all that great, but what kind of basic Pokemon are you attacking into? If you're hitting into a Drampa, then you could attach a Choice Band to your Machamp GX, and you could still one-hit knock out a Drampa GX with Crosscut, even though it's a basic Pokemon. So I think Crosscut is a nice little attack. It doesn't, it's not overpowered, but it could be used to do a significant amount of damage to evolved Pokemon, and I don't mind it. It's not a game-breaking attack, but it is pretty good, and the cost to damage payout is pretty nice. So the next attack, Bedrock Breaker, for 3 fighting energy, says discard any stadium card in play and does 130. So that to me is not a great attack. 3 energy for 130 on a Stage 2. 3 energy is going to be very difficult to get onto your Machamp GX. There's no real way to accelerate energy onto your Machamp in standard format right now. I mean, you could use Carbink Break to accelerate energy onto your Machamp, but that just seems very clunky to me. Maybe by that time you're playing a break Pokemon, a Stage 1 kind of break Pokemon, and then also a Stage 2, and just doesn't seem all that viable to me. There's no real acceleration options for Pokemon GX right now, so this is just a Pokemon with a couple of very expensive attacks. I don't really like the idea of 3 manual attachments in order to attack. You could max elixir into your Machops before evolving them up into Machoke, but I think that is clunky as well and is not really a viable strategy for a competitive deck. So I think at the end of the day, probably your best option to play a Machamp GX deck is going to be with that Carbink Break card to accelerate energy onto it. But, I think that might be a little slow just in standard format as far as real competitive lists go. But that probably is going to be your best bet. Discarding a stadium could be useful. Maybe you get to discard your opponent's Po-Town, or maybe you get to discard their Parallel City. I think Parallel City is still a really good card in standard format, and should probably start to see more play since there are more evolution decks, more evolved decks that fill their bench in standard format. But at the end of the day, a little underpowered. So maybe you have a strong energy on there. It does 150, Choice Band 180, but it's still, it's okay. But I would hope for maybe 150 damage for a 3 energy attack that's hard to accelerate on a Stage 2 fighting Pokemon. Machamp GX's GX attack. Muscle Punch GX does 180 damage. And it says this attack's damage is not affected by resistance. So nice little one-hit KO attack there. You're going to be able to pull off a big Muscle Punch GX to kind of just wipe out your opponent's threat. If you have 1 or 2 strong energy on your Machamp GX, that can easily accelerate up to 220 damage. And then you have a choice band on it. Then you're hitting that magic 250. That's enough to one-hit knock out, pretty much any threat you could run into in standard format. So Muscle Punch GX allows Machamp GX to have this big one-hit KO option. When you're looking at Machamp GX though, you kind of have to compare it to the other fighting Pokemon available to us, and immediately kind of Zygarde EX comes to mind. I think that Machamp GX is just a little too hard to set up, and the damage is just not quite accessible enough. It's just not, these attacks are just not quite efficient enough to outclass a card like Zygarde EX. With Carbink, you could just accelerate energy onto your Zygarde EX, and then Zygarde EX has that all cells burn attack that you could use with that tool card specifically made for Zygarde EX. So you do have a nice one-hit KO option with your Zygarde. I just don't think that Machamp GX really outclasses Zygarde EX in any sort of significant way. That being said, Machamp does have 250 hit points, is a huge Pokemon. If you wanted to build a deck around it, you could probably make it work, but it's probably not going to be winning too many tournaments in your local area. Machamp does have a weakness to Psychic, meaning that it is weak to those pesky Trashalanche Garbodors, but and also Espeon is going to one-hit KO this thing relatively easy if you put any energy on it. And it does have a retreat cost of 3. Retreat cost of 3. Retreat isn't quite as bad as it used to be, since every deck is going to be playing multiple copies of Guzma, but it is still something to consider. So that's it for my review of Machamp GX. Thank you all for checking it out. Let me know what you think of Machamp GX in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to my channel. Thank you all for taking some time to talk about this card with me. Peace.